A respected doctor and father finds himself wrongfully handcuffed in front of his terrified kids, all because of one officer's shocking actions. But when the truth finally surfaces, an unexpected twist changes everything. What unfolds next is nothing short of jaw-dropping. You won't believe how karma delivers justice in the end. Before we get into this powerful story, comment below where in the world you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out. It was a bright Saturday morning in the Anderson home, and Dr. Marcus Anderson was in the kitchen with his two children, Maya and Leo. The smell of pancakes filled the air as Dr. Anderson flipped them with ease, smiling as Maya eagerly counted the chocolate chips in hers. Leo was giggling, telling his dad a story about his last soccer practice, where he'd almost scored a goal but tripped at the last second. Dr. Anderson laughed with him, gently ruffling Leo's hair and saying he'd get that goal next time. It was the kind of morning Dr. Anderson cherished, just him and his kids, relaxed and happy, without the constant rush of his usual work days at the hospital. His phone buzzed with messages from patients he'd helped the previous week while volunteering at a rural clinic. The thank you messages reminded him why he loved his work, and he felt a deep pride in his role, not only as a doctor, but as a father. As they finished breakfast, the three of them packed up for a day at the park. Dr. Anderson packed a bag with snacks, water, and a blanket, and Leo grabbed his soccer ball, ready to show his dad some new tricks. Just as they were heading to the door, a police car slowly rolled by the house. Dr. Anderson caught a glimpse of the officer inside, a tall, stern-looking man who stared a little too long at them. Dr. Anderson gave him a polite nod, but the officer didn't respond, his eyes lingering on the family with an unreadable look. The moment was brief, but something about it stayed with Dr. Anderson as they walked to their car. He brushed it off, focusing instead on the fun day ahead. When they arrived at the park, Maya and Leo ran toward the playground, their laughter ringing through the open space as Dr. Anderson set up their blanket under a large oak tree. He took out his phone and started recording the kids, capturing moments of them climbing and swinging, their carefree joy lighting up his face. His heart swelled with pride watching them, feeling grateful for these little moments. Suddenly, he noticed a figure approaching out of the corner of his eye. It was the same officer he'd seen earlier, walking quickly toward them. Dr. Anderson stood up, uncertain of what was going on, but kept his calm, hoping this would be a simple interaction. The officer, however, came up with a stern look, his hand already resting on his belt. "Sir, I need to speak with you," he said, his voice sharp and cold. Dr. Anderson maintained his composure, nodding respectfully as he looked the officer in the eye. "Of course, officer. Is there a problem?" he asked, keeping his tone steady, although he felt a flicker of unease. Maya and Leo, still laughing and playing on the nearby swings, hadn't noticed the interaction yet. Dr. Anderson wanted to keep it that way. The officer, whose name tag read Officer Blake, didn't ease up. He eyed Dr. Anderson with suspicion, his gaze sharp and assessing. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in the area," he said, his words carrying a bite. "You fit the description of someone we're looking for." Dr. Anderson's mind raced as he tried to understand. He had lived in this neighborhood for years and knew he'd done nothing wrong. He took a deep breath, pulling out his wallet calmly and offering his identification. "I'm Dr. Marcus Anderson," he explained, showing his medical ID as well. "I'm here with my kids, just enjoying the morning." He gestured toward Maya and Leo, hoping the sight of them would make the officer realize there'd been a mistake. But Officer Blake barely glanced at the ID, ignoring the family scene around them. Instead, his voice grew more aggressive, almost as if he hadn't heard Dr. Anderson at all. "I need you to put your hands where I can see them and turn around," he ordered, his tone louder now. The words struck like a hammer, and the few people nearby began to watch, their conversations falling silent. Dr. Anderson's heart sank. He felt a surge of fear, not for himself, but for his children, who had now turned to see what was happening. Leo's eyes were wide with confusion, and Maya clutched the swing chains tightly, her little face filled with worry. Dr. Anderson knew he had to stay calm for them, if not for himself. He raised his hands slowly, keeping his eyes steady on Officer Blake. "Please, officer," he said gently. "There's no need for this. I'm just here with my kids." But Officer Blake's expression didn't soften. Instead, he took a step closer, reaching for his handcuffs, his eyes hard and unyielding. "I'm not asking again," he said, his voice a threat in itself. Dr. Anderson's pulse quickened, but he forced himself to remain calm, feeling the weight of his children's eyes on him. He turned to Maya and Leo, giving them a small, reassuring nod, though his own heart ached seeing their frightened faces. "Stay right there, okay?" he said softly, trying to sound strong. But the fear in their eyes cut him deeply, and he could sense that this moment was leaving a mark on them, one that would be hard to erase. Without further argument, he turned around as Officer Blake demanded, placing his hands behind his back. The cold metal of the cuffs snapped tightly onto his wrists, a humiliating sensation he had never imagined he would feel. The world around him seemed to slow. Every sound and movement heightened. Maya's small voice broke the silence, a shaky whisper to her brother. "Why are they doing this to Daddy?" Officer Blake pressed down firmly on Dr. Anderson's shoulder, forcing him to kneel on the grass. Dr. Anderson tried to maintain his dignity, even as his knees dug into the dirt. He kept his gaze forward, refusing to look at his children now, not wanting them to see the struggle on his face. But he could hear them, and that was worse. Leo's voice trembled as he tried to reassure his sister, though he was clearly as scared as she was. It's okay, Maya," he murmured, but the uncertainty in his tone was unmistakable. A few bystanders had gathered, whispering among themselves, some with phones out recording. One woman in the crowd called out, "Is this necessary? He's with his kids." Another man tried to approach but stopped when Officer Blake shot him a glare that silenced any further protests. Dr. Anderson wanted to say something, to tell his children it would be all right, to reassure the crowd that this was some mistake. But he knew anything he said now would likely only make things worse. He stayed silent, breathing steadily, focusing on staying composed. Inside, though, he felt a deep humiliation and sadness, knowing that his children were witnessing him in this powerless state. He could only hope that somehow they would understand this wasn't about who he truly was. But as Officer Blake roughly lifted him back onto his feet, Dr. Anderson heard Maya's small voice again, piercing the tense silence. "Daddy, did you do something wrong?" She looked so bewildered, so hurt, her innocence shattered by the sight of her father in cuffs. Dr. Anderson couldn't bear it, his heart breaking as he looked at her, his eyes filled with an apology he couldn't put into words. Dr. Anderson took a deep breath, steadying himself as best as he could. He looked at Maya, his voice soft but firm. "No, sweetheart, I didn't do anything wrong." He forced a gentle smile, hoping it would reassure her, even though he could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. But Officer Blake seemed to have no patience for this brief exchange. He tightened his grip on Dr. Anderson's arm and began pulling him toward the squad car. Dr. Anderson stumbled slightly, the tight handcuffs biting into his wrists. He tried to resist just enough to slow down, looking back at his children who stood frozen, still in shock. "Can someone please stay with my kids?" he called out, desperation leaking into his voice. He couldn't bear the thought of them standing there alone, scared and confused, without anyone to comfort them. One of the bystanders, a middle-aged woman with a kind face, stepped forward. She crouched down beside Maya and Leo, placing a gentle hand on each of their shoulders. "I'll stay with them," she said, her voice kind but filled with indignation as she looked up at Officer Blake. "This isn't right." Officer Blake shot her an annoyed look, but he said nothing, shoving Dr. Anderson toward the car with little regard. Dr. Anderson managed one last look at his children, trying to burn this image of them into his mind, to hold on to as he faced whatever was coming next. He could see Leo holding Maya's hand tightly, his little face set with a mixture of fear and anger. Dr. Anderson hoped that somehow his son would understand that standing strong didn't always mean fighting back. As he was pushed into the back seat of the squad car, he felt an overwhelming sense of helplessness. a feeling he had never experienced in his career, where he was usually the one in control, helping others, saving lives. The door slammed shut, muffling the sounds of the world outside. Through the window he could see Maya and Leo watching him, their faces pressed against the kind woman's sides. He could almost feel their small, trusting eyes on him, their confusion and fear radiating through the glass. Inside the car, Officer Blake sat in the front seat, silent and unmoved. Dr. Anderson took a deep breath, swallowing his pride and anger. "Officer," he began, keeping his voice as steady as he could manage. "I don't understand why you're doing this. I've done nothing wrong. I'm here with my kids. This is a mistake." Blake didn't turn around, didn't offer any hint of explanation. He simply started the car, the engine rumbling to life, and drove away from the park, leaving Dr. Anderson's children behind. Standing in the care of strangers, Dr. Anderson's chest tightened as he watched them disappear from sight, their figures growing smaller and smaller until they vanished around the bend. The weight of it all settled over him, filling the silence in the car. As the car moved away from the park, Dr. Anderson sat in the back seat, his mind racing. He tried to piece together what had just happened, struggling to comprehend why a quiet day with his kids had turned into this nightmare. The familiar streets rolled by, but they felt strangely distant, as if he were in a dream he couldn't wake up from. He took another deep breath and spoke again, hoping that maybe, somehow, Officer Blake would listen this time. "Officer Blake," he said carefully, "you've made a mistake. I'm a doctor. I'm a respected member of this community. Please, let's stop and talk this through." But Officer Blake's gaze remained fixed on the road, his jaw set and unyielding. He didn't acknowledge Dr. Anderson's words, his silence, a wall Dr. Anderson couldn't break through. Dr. Anderson could feel the tension thicken the air, could sense the rigid, almost hostile energy radiating from the officer. It was as though Blake had already made up his mind, and no amount of reasoning would sway him. After several long minutes of tense silence, they pulled into the police station parking lot. The station was a drab, squat building, its walls stained by years of rain and wear. As the car came to a halt, Dr. Anderson's mind flashed to his children, standing alone back at the park, their last image of him being dragged away in handcuffs. He swallowed hard, trying to push down the wave of worry that rose in him. He had to stay strong, if not for himself, then for them. Officer Blake finally got out of the car, slamming his door and circling around to pull Dr. Anderson out. The rough grip on his arm as he was hauled out felt like yet another blow, each action reinforcing the humiliation and confusion clouding his mind. He could feel the eyes of others on him as they entered the station, a few officers glancing up from their desks, their expressions a mix of curiosity and indifference. As they entered a small, dimly lit holding room, Officer Blake finally spoke, his tone cold and dismissive. "Sit down," he commanded, gesturing to a hard, metal chair bolted to the floor. Dr. Anderson complied, trying to keep his frustration in check. He had never felt so powerless, so small, in a place that was supposed to uphold justice and protect its citizens. The minutes dragged by, with no explanation, no indication of what was happening. The silence pressed down on him, and he found himself replaying the scene at the park over and over in his mind, trying to understand why he'd been singled out, why none of his words seemed to matter. Finally, the door opened, and another officer stepped inside, glancing down at a clipboard. He looked from the clipboard to Dr. Anderson, then back to the clipboard, a flicker of realization crossing his face. "Dr. Anderson?" he asked, his tone suddenly more respectful. Dr. Anderson nodded, his heart pounding, a faint hope sparking in him. Maybe, finally, someone was going to listen. The new officer's demeanor was noticeably different from Officer Blake's. He seemed taken aback, almost surprised, as he studied Dr. Anderson, then glanced down at the clipboard again as if to confirm he hadn't made a mistake. "Dr. Marcus Anderson, right?" he repeated, softer this time, almost with a note of disbelief. "Yes," Dr. Anderson replied, his voice steady but weary. "I've been trying to explain this from the beginning. I'm a doctor, not a criminal. I was with my children at the park. There's been a terrible misunderstanding." The officer nodded slowly, frowning as he processed Dr. Anderson's words. He gave Officer Blake a sharp look, clearly sensing that something was off. "Blake, what exactly is going on here?" he asked, an edge of irritation in his voice. Blake stiffened, his jaw tightening, but he didn't respond immediately. Dr. Anderson could see the tension between the two officers, and for the first time since this nightmare began, he felt a glimmer of hope that someone might finally understand. "This man fit the description of a suspect," Blake replied, his tone defensive. "Suspicious behavior, loitering in the park. I was following standard procedure." The other officer's frown deepened, his skepticism evident. "With his kids?" he asked, his voice laced with disbelief. He shook his head, clearly unconvinced by Blake's justification. Turning back to Dr. Anderson, he said, "Dr. Anderson, please, let's get these cuffs off you." He moved forward, carefully unlocking the cuffs from Dr. Anderson's wrists. The relief was immediate, though the sting from the metal bands still lingered on his skin. Dr. Anderson rubbed his wrists, feeling a rush of anger, frustration, and gratitude all at once. His shoulders relaxed slightly, the heavy weight of tension finally beginning to lift. As he sat there, he watched the other officer turn to Blake, his expression darkening. "Blake, I think we need to have a conversation outside." There was a clear note of reprimand in his voice, and Dr. Anderson felt a surge of vindication as he watched Blake's face tighten in response. The two officers stepped outside, leaving the door slightly ajar. Dr. Anderson couldn't hear every word, but the tone was unmistakable. The other officer's voice carried a mixture of disbelief and frustration as he questioned Blake's actions, challenging his reasoning and the excessive force he'd used. Dr. Anderson's pulse quickened, the weight of the incident slowly shifting as he realized that Blake might actually face consequences. Left alone in the room, he exhaled deeply, the reality of what he'd just endured settling over him. He thought of his children, standing alone with a stranger, scared and confused, wondering where their father was. The relief of freedom was tempered by the pain of knowing the image they'd been left with, the fear and betrayal they must have felt. Just then, the door opened again, and the second officer re-entered, looking at Dr. Anderson with a mixture of apology and respect. "Dr. Anderson, I am so sorry for what you've gone through today. We're going to make sure you get home safely, and that your children are okay." He paused, his voice softening. "You shouldn't have been put through this. I'll personally see to it that this matter is reviewed." Dr. Anderson nodded, appreciating the officer's attempt to make things right, but the sense of violation and anger still pulsed within him. He didn't respond immediately, choosing instead to steady himself, to let the intense emotion settle just enough so he could think clearly. The officer motioned for him to follow, and together they walked out of the holding room, down the sterile hallway, and back into the main area of the station. As they reached the front desk, Dr. Anderson's phone and belongings were returned to him. The officer who'd removed the cuffs from his wrists handed them back with a quiet, "Here you go, doctor. I'm truly sorry for all of this." Dr. Anderson accepted his things in silence, feeling the weight of what had just happened pressing on him more heavily with each passing second. His mind was filled with images of his children's frightened faces, the way they'd looked at him with such confusion and fear, as if they couldn't understand how something like this could happen to their father, someone they trusted and admired. At that moment, the station doors swung open, and the kind woman from the park entered, leading Maya and Leo by the hands. The instant they saw him, they broke free, running to him with tear-streaked faces, arms outstretched. Dr. Anderson knelt down, pulling them close, holding them tightly as if he could shield them from all the hurt and confusion they'd just experienced. "Daddy," Maya sobbed, burying her face in his shoulder. "Why did they take you away? You didn't do anything wrong." Her small body shook as she clung to him, her innocent heart struggling to understand the cruelty she'd just witnessed. Leo hugged his father's side, his expression torn between anger and worry. "I told them you didn't do anything," he said in a shaky voice, looking up at Dr. Anderson with fierce loyalty. "I knew you didn't do anything, Dad." Dr. Anderson held them both, feeling his own tears welling up. "I know, baby," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I know. None of this should have happened. I'm so sorry you had to see it." He stroked their hair, feeling the fragile weight of their trust, which had been tested in a way they couldn't yet fully understand. The woman who'd brought them stepped back, giving him a sympathetic nod. "They were so brave, Doctor," she said softly. "They knew you didn't do anything wrong. Everyone there did. We're all standing by you." Her words, though small, felt like a balm to his wounded heart, a reminder that people around him could see the truth, even when authority figures acted unjustly. As he rose to his feet, still holding Maya and Leo close, Dr. Anderson turned back to the officers, his expression resolute. "I'm taking my kids home," he said quietly, "but this isn't over." His tone was calm, but his words carried the weight of someone who knew that what had happened to him today couldn't be ignored, swept aside, or justified. The officer who had helped him looked down, nodding solemnly. "Understood, Dr. Anderson," he replied, acknowledging the gravity of the moment. Dr. Anderson held his children close as they stepped out of the station, the afternoon sun casting a warm glow that felt jarringly at odds with the heaviness in his heart. The walk to the car was silent, his children clinging tightly to him, their small hands gripping his own as though afraid he might be taken from them again. As they reached the car, he knelt down to look them in the eyes, searching for the words to reassure them, to somehow make sense of what they'd just experienced. "Listen to me," he said softly, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "What happened back there? It was wrong. None of it was your fault, and it wasn't mine either." He paused, seeing the confusion and sadness in their eyes, wanting desperately to erase it but knowing he couldn't. Sometimes people make mistakes. Sometimes they do things that aren't fair. But I want you to know that none of this changes who I am, or who you are. You both understand?" Maya nodded slowly, though her brow was furrowed, her young mind struggling to process. Leo, however, was quieter, his gaze fixed on the ground. After a moment, he looked up, his expression one of deep hurt. "But Dad, why did he hate you? You didn't do anything to him." Dr. Anderson felt his heart ache, the question cutting through him in a way he hadn't anticipated. He pulled Leo closer, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "I don't know why, son," he said honestly, hating that he didn't have a better answer. "Sometimes people judge others without knowing them. They see someone and decide things about them that aren't true. But that doesn't make what they did right, and it doesn't make us any less." Leo nodded, his little jaw set in a way that was both heartbreaking and proud, as if he was already trying to process and protect himself from what he'd seen. Dr. Anderson could see that his son was trying to stay strong, to push down the hurt, and he felt a fresh wave of anger at the injustice of it all. No child should have to learn such lessons so young. They drove home in silence, each of them lost in thought. Dr. Anderson's mind raced with everything that had happened, replaying every moment, feeling the weight of the injustice growing heavier. But alongside the anger and sadness, he also felt a growing resolve. This wasn't just about him. It was about his children, about what they would remember, and about the world they would grow up in. When they finally arrived home, Dr. Anderson helped Maya and Leo out of the car, their small hands still clutching his as they walked to the front door. The house, usually a place of warmth and laughter, felt strangely quiet, almost heavy with the echo of what had happened that day. As they stepped inside, Maya, still visibly shaken, sat on the couch, clutching her stuffed animal close, while Leo paced in the living room, his expression pensive and restless. Dr. Anderson joined them, sitting between his children, pulling them close to either side of him. He felt the weight of what he needed to say, the importance of addressing the fear and confusion in their hearts before it became something deeper and harder to untangle. He knew that today had changed something in their lives, perhaps forever, and he wanted to be the one to guide them through it. "Listen, Maya, Leo," he began gently, his voice calm but firm. What happened today, it was unfair and it was wrong. But I want you both to understand that this isn't how everyone in the world acts. There are so many good people, kind, caring people, who would never treat anyone the way that officer treated me. And I don't want you to lose hope in people because of one bad experience. Maya looked up at him, her eyes wide, still full of questions. But Daddy, what if it happens again? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. The innocence in her question broke his heart, and he took a steadying breath, fighting to keep his own emotions in check. He held her hand, squeezing it gently. I can't promise it won't, sweetheart, he said honestly. But what I can promise is that we'll always face it together. We don't have to let other people's actions change who we are or what we believe. No one can take away our dignity unless we let them. You understand? Leo, who had been quiet this whole time, finally spoke, his young voice carrying a determined edge. But Dad, isn't there something we can do so that this doesn't happen to anyone else? His words caught Dr. Anderson off guard, but he saw a spark in his son's eyes, a resilience that mirrored his own, and he felt a surge of pride. Yes, Leo, there is, he said, nodding slowly. We can speak up. We can tell our story so that people know what happened. And we can make sure that the officer is held accountable for what he did. Sometimes change happens when people stand together and speak the truth. He looked at both of them, hoping they felt the strength in his words. We have to be brave, not just for ourselves, but for others who might go through something similar. Maya and Leo nodded, each of them processing this in their own way, and he could see a quiet understanding beginning to settle over them. The fear and confusion had not disappeared, but they had found something else now, a sense of purpose, of resilience. In that moment, Dr. Anderson felt a new determination solidify within him. He would not let this incident fade into silence. He would seek justice, not only for himself but for his children, and for every other person who might face the same injustice. The following day, Dr. Anderson woke up early, his mind already focused on the path ahead. The night had been restless, memories of the previous day replaying in his mind, each moment fueling his determination to seek accountability. He sat at the kitchen table, sipping his coffee as he scrolled through his phone, already filled with messages of support from friends, family, and even strangers who had heard about the incident from the video circulating online. After a quiet breakfast with Maya and Leo, he decided it was time to take the next step. He called his close friend Kevin, a civil rights attorney, explaining everything that had happened in detail, sparing none of the humiliating or heartbreaking moments. Kevin listened intently, his voice firm and supportive as he promised to help Dr. Anderson seek justice. They agreed to meet later that day to discuss their options. By noon, Dr. Anderson was sitting across from Kevin in his small law office, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Kevin looked at him with an expression that was both sympathetic and resolute. Marcus, what you went through was unacceptable. We have every right to hold that officer and the department accountable, he said. The fact that this happened in front of your children makes it even more outrageous. We're going to make sure they hear you loud and clear. Dr. Anderson nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. For the first time since the incident, he felt like he was taking control, turning the pain into purpose. Thank you, Kevin, he replied, his voice steady. I want people to know what happened. I don't want anyone else, especially kids, to go through what my children had to see. Kevin leaned forward, outlining a plan. First, we're going to file a formal complaint with the police department, and we'll be pushing for disciplinary action against Officer Blake. We'll also make a public statement. With the video evidence and witnesses, we have a strong case, Marcus, and the community will be on your side. They've already started rallying behind you. As they talked through the details, Dr. Anderson felt a growing sense of empowerment. He realized that this fight wasn't just for himself, it was for his children, for their future, and for everyone who had experienced or could experience similar injustices. Each word he and Kevin exchanged solidified his resolve, transforming his anger into a clear purpose. Later that afternoon, they finalized the complaint, submitting it to the department, and scheduled a press conference for the following day. The weight of the injustice lingered, but with every step forward, Dr. Anderson felt the power shifting back to him. This wasn't going to be just another incident lost in silence. It would be a voice for change. The next day dawned bright and clear, but a tense energy filled the air as Dr. Anderson prepared for the press conference. He knew this would be his chance to share his story with the community, to set the record straight, and to speak up not only for himself, but for anyone who had been unfairly treated or profiled. Maya and Leo watched him from the living room, their eyes filled with a mixture of pride and worry. They understood that today was important, that their father was standing up not only for himself but for them, and for others who might one day be in their shoes. When they arrived at the small community center, a crowd had already gathered. Neighbors, friends, and even people Dr. Anderson didn't know personally, but who had seen the video and felt moved to come. Some held signs that read, "Justice for Dr. Anderson and End Racial Profiling." News cameras were set up, reporters bustling around, ready to capture every word. Dr. Anderson took a deep breath, feeling the gravity of the moment settle over him. Kevin stood beside him, offering a reassuring nod. As he stepped up to the podium, a hush fell over the crowd. He looked out at the sea of faces, each one expectant, supportive, and he felt a surge of strength. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about all of them, about everyone who believed in fairness, justice, and respect. He cleared his throat, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Thank you all for being here today," he began. "I never imagined I'd be standing here under these circumstances. I'm a doctor, a father, a member of this community, and like many of you, I believe in treating everyone with respect and dignity." He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd, feeling their solidarity. What happened to me in front of my children was not just an isolated incident. It was a painful reminder that racial profiling still exists, even in our own neighborhoods, affecting families and children. His voice wavered slightly, but he continued, his conviction growing stronger. No one should have to experience what I went through, especially not in front of their children, who had to witness their father treated as less than he is, simply because of the color of his skin. He looked over at Maya and Leo, who were standing with Kevin, their eyes fixed on him, and his heart swelled with pride for them. "I stand here today because I want a better future for my children, for all our children, a future where they don't have to live in fear of being judged or mistreated because of who they are." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, and Dr. Anderson felt the support wrapping around him, giving him strength. He continued, "We've filed a formal complaint with the police department, and we will pursue justice for what happened. But this isn't just about one officer or one incident. This is about the need for accountability, for change in the way we approach policing in our communities." Dr. Anderson took a deep breath, his voice firm. "I refuse to let this experience define me, and I refuse to let it be forgotten. I am here to make sure that no one else has to go through what I did, and to remind every person here that we have the power to demand change. Together, we can stand against injustice and create a world where every person is respected and valued." As he finished, a wave of applause erupted, filling the room with a powerful sense of unity and hope. Reporters began shouting questions, but Dr. Anderson's focus was solely on his children. He stepped down from the podium and walked over to them, kneeling down so he could look them in the eyes. Maya and Leo hugged him tightly, their faces alight with pride and understanding. "We're proud of you, Dad," Leo whispered, his voice steady with a maturity beyond his years. Dr. Anderson hugged them back, feeling a sense of fulfillment and purpose. He knew that the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but in this moment, surrounded by his family and community, he felt stronger than ever. As the press conference wrapped up and people began to disperse, Dr. Anderson felt an overwhelming mix of relief and determination. He had taken the first step, but he knew this was only the beginning. The support from the community was powerful, but he also understood that real change required more than words. It demanded action, persistence, and resilience. Kevin, his lawyer and friend, approached him with a proud smile. clapping a hand on his shoulder. "You did great out there, Marcus," Kevin said. "People are listening and they're ready to back you up. But now we need to keep pushing forward, keep the momentum going." Dr. Anderson nodded, his gaze firm. "I know, Kevin. This has to go somewhere. It can't just be another story that fades out when the news cycle moves on." He glanced at his children, who were playing nearby with other kids, their laughter lifting his spirits despite the heaviness of the day. He knew that everything he was doing now was for them, for their future. Over the next few days, Dr. Anderson worked closely with Kevin to gather as much evidence and witness testimony as possible. They reached out to people who had been at the park that day, collecting videos and first-hand accounts from those who had seen the incident unfold. Many people stepped forward willingly, eager to support him and offer their accounts of Officer Blake's aggressive behavior. Each new piece of evidence added strength to their case, building a foundation of truth that could not be ignored. As word spread, more community members began to rally around Dr. Anderson, organizing peaceful gatherings and advocating for policy changes within the police department. The local news stations continued to cover the story, with journalists following the case closely. Dr. Anderson could feel the tide turning, a growing awareness among people who were willing to stand up against injustices that had too often gone unchallenged. One evening, as he was reviewing the evidence with Kevin, Dr. Anderson's phone buzzed with a message from a city council member. The council member expressed support for Dr. Anderson's cause and offered to meet to discuss possible reforms in police training and accountability measures. Dr. Anderson felt a glimmer of hope. This was the kind of systemic change he had dreamed of, a chance to address the root causes of discrimination rather than just the symptoms. When he shared the news with Maya and Leo that evening, they listened intently, their eyes wide with interest. Leo, ever thoughtful, asked, "So does that mean things might really change, Dad? That maybe no one else will have to go through what we did?" Dr. Anderson pulled him close, smiling with a mixture of pride and resolve. "That's the goal, Leo," he said, his voice filled with quiet strength. "It won't happen overnight, but if we keep pushing, if we keep speaking out and working together, we can make things better, not just for us, but for everyone." As he tucked Maya and Leo into bed that night, Dr. Anderson felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that the journey was far from over, but for the first time, he truly believed that real, lasting change was possible. And as he closed their bedroom door and walked down the quiet hallway, he made a silent vow to keep fighting, to never back down until his children, and children everywhere, could grow up in a world that treated them with the respect and dignity they deserved. In the following weeks, the fight for justice gained even more momentum. Dr. Anderson found himself at the center of a growing movement, with community members and activists rallying behind him to demand accountability from the police department. The case had sparked widespread conversations, with people coming forward to share their own experiences of discrimination and profiling. What had started as a personal battle was evolving into a collective call for change, echoing throughout the city. One evening, as Dr. Anderson was preparing for yet another meeting with community leaders, he received an unexpected phone call. The number was unfamiliar, but something told him to answer. "Dr. Anderson, this is Chief Rodriguez from the police department," a steady voice said on the other end. There was a pause, and Dr. Anderson could sense an unusual tension in the chief's tone. "I wanted to personally reach out to discuss the incident involving Officer Blake. We're taking this matter very seriously." Dr. Anderson felt a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. This was the first time anyone from the police department had directly addressed him since the incident. "I appreciate the call, Chief Rodriguez," he replied cautiously. "My family has been through a lot, and I hope you understand how important it is to see real accountability and change." Chief Rodriguez hesitated before continuing, his voice softening. "Dr. Anderson, I'm a father too, and I understand the impact this must have had on your children. I would like to invite you to meet with us, along with members of the City Council and the Civilian Review Board. We're committed to reviewing our procedures and listening to the community's concerns." The invitation surprised Dr. Anderson. It was a small step, but it was significant. For a long moment he considered what it could mean, not just for his own family, but for others who had faced similar treatment. This meeting could be an opportunity to influence real, lasting reform within the department. "Thank you, Chief," Dr. Anderson replied, his tone firm. "I'll attend the meeting and I'll bring members of the community with me. This is a conversation that involves all of us." They agreed on a date, and Dr. Anderson hung up, his mind racing. He knew that this meeting wouldn't solve everything, but it was a chance to present their demands directly to those in power. That evening, he shared the news with Kevin, who was cautiously optimistic, and together they outlined a list of issues to address: training on implicit bias, accountability measures, and stronger protections against racial profiling. When Dr. Anderson told Maya and Leo about the meeting, he saw a spark of hope in their eyes. Maya hugged him tightly, her small voice filled with pride. "You're really brave, Daddy. I'm glad you're doing this." He smiled, pulling both of them into his arms. "I'm doing this for you," he whispered, his voice filled with conviction. "So you can grow up in a world that's fair, where people treat each other with respect." As he held his children close, Dr. Anderson knew that the road ahead was still long and uncertain, but with each step, he felt his resolve deepen. He was no longer just a father or a doctor. He was an advocate for change, and he would not stop until justice was served. On the day of the meeting, the atmosphere at City Hall was charged with anticipation. Dr. Anderson arrived early with Kevin and a few key community members, each of whom had their own stories of racial profiling or unjust treatment to share. Outside, a small crowd had gathered, holding signs and banners demanding justice and reform, their voices unified in purpose. The media was present, capturing the event, adding to the gravity of the moment. Dr. Anderson felt a mixture of nerves and determination. This was their chance to be heard, to push for changes that could prevent others from enduring the same pain he and his children had. Inside the council chamber, the room was filled with city officials, members of the Civilian Review Board, and the police department's leadership, including Chief Rodriguez. Officer Blake was notably absent, though Dr. Anderson noticed the tension in the police representatives' faces, a sign that this issue had unsettled them. As the meeting began, Chief Rodriguez stood and addressed the room, acknowledging the incident. "We are here because of a failure on our part," he said, his tone somber. "What happened to Dr. Anderson should not have happened. Our job is to protect and serve every member of this community, and we failed to uphold that duty. I want to personally apologize to Dr. Anderson and his family for the trauma they experienced." His words were formal, carefully chosen, but Dr. Anderson could sense the weight of accountability pressing on the chief. Dr. Anderson took a deep breath as he rose to speak, all eyes on him. "Thank you for the apology, Chief Rodriguez, but an apology alone is not enough," he began, his voice steady but charged with emotion. "My children watched me, their father, handcuffed and humiliated without reason. That kind of trauma doesn't just go away. It lingers, shaping how they see themselves and how they see authority." His voice grew firmer. "We're here to make sure that no one else has to experience that, and that requires more than words. It requires real, tangible change." He outlined his demands clearly and precisely: mandatory training for officers on implicit bias, regular psychological evaluations, accountability systems with civilian oversight, and stronger disciplinary actions for officers found guilty of racial profiling. Each demand was met with nods and murmurs of agreement from the audience and community members present. As he finished, a council member leaned forward, visibly moved. "Dr. Anderson, you've brought to light issues that go beyond a single incident. The City Council is committed to addressing these concerns, and we're prepared to take immediate steps toward reform," she stated, her tone resolute. She proposed the formation of a committee to oversee the implementation of these changes, including members from the community. Chief Rodriguez agreed, his expression sober. "We are committed to working with you, Dr. Anderson, and the community to ensure that incidents like this are thoroughly investigated and that officers are held accountable. We cannot erase what happened, but we can prevent it from happening again." Dr. Anderson felt a swell of relief mingled with cautious optimism. For the first time, he could see the possibility of real change taking shape, a promise of progress that went beyond his own personal battle. He glanced around at the faces of his fellow community members, many of whom had shared their own painful stories, and he saw the same glimmer of hope reflected in their eyes. As the meeting concluded, Chief Rodriguez approached Dr. Anderson personally. "Thank you for your courage," he said quietly. "Your voice has been a wake-up call for all of us. I promise you, we'll do better." Dr. Anderson nodded, feeling the magnitude of the moment. "Let's make sure that promise is kept, Chief," he replied, his words a reminder that this was only the beginning. With the support of his community, he knew he would keep pushing forward until justice wasn't just a word, but a reality. As Dr. Anderson left the City Hall that evening, he felt the weight of a significant step forward. The crowd outside, still gathered in solidarity, erupted in applause as he emerged. He saw familiar faces, neighbors, colleagues, patients, and even strangers who had been moved by his story. Their cheers and encouragement filled him with renewed energy, reminding him that he wasn't alone in this fight. He paused, taking a moment to thank them, grateful for the strength their support had given him. As he made his way home with Kevin, the two of them discussed the outcomes of the meeting. Kevin was cautiously optimistic, reminding Dr. Anderson that although the council's promises were promising, the work was far from over. They've agreed to reform measures and to civilian oversight, but we'll need to stay vigilant. Change isn't instant, Marcus, he said. This could take months, maybe longer. We'll need to hold them to every word. Dr. Anderson nodded, understanding the reality ahead. I'm ready for that, he replied. We've come this far, I'm not going to let it slip away. He thought of Maya and Leo, their innocent trust shaken but their pride in him still clear. He would do whatever it took to make sure they could grow up in a world where they felt safe and valued. When he finally arrived home, his children greeted him eagerly, their eyes bright with curiosity. They'd heard snippets of what had happened and wanted to know everything. Dr. Anderson sat with them in the living room, describing the meeting in simple terms they could understand. He told them about the community's support, the council's promises, and the police chief's apology. Maya listened intently, her small hands gripping his as she took in every word. Does that mean it's over, Daddy? She asked, her voice hopeful. Dr. Anderson smiled gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. Not quite, sweetheart, he said, but it means we've made a big step forward, and if we keep working together, things will get better, little by little. Leo, always thoughtful, looked up at him, his face serious. Will that police officer get in trouble? He asked, his voice filled with quiet determination. Dr. Anderson met his son's gaze, understanding the depth of his question. He'll face the consequences for what he did, Leo, he replied. And part of what we're doing is making sure that officers who act unfairly are held responsible. We're making sure that rules are put in place, so things like this don't happen to other families. The weight of that promise settled over him, filling him with both responsibility and pride. As they talked, Dr. Anderson realized how much his children had grown through this experience. They understood more than he'd realized, and their empathy and strength were beyond their years. He hugged them tightly, grateful for their resilience, for their faith in him, and for their willingness to stand by him in this fight. That night, as Dr. Anderson lay in bed, he felt a sense of calm he hadn't felt since the ordeal began. There would still be challenges ahead, meetings, rallies, perhaps even setbacks, but he knew now that they were on the path to meaningful change. The movement they'd started had taken root, and with each passing day, more voices were joining in, amplifying their call for justice and fairness. In the quiet of the evening, he made a promise to himself and to his children. He would see this through to the end, ensuring that the world they grew up in was better than the one he had faced. And as he drifted into sleep, he held on to that vision, a future where dignity and respect were not privileges, but rights shared by everyone. The following week, Dr. Anderson's case continued to gain traction. with local news outlets following the story closely. Reports highlighted the community's demand for justice and the city council's promise for reform. Dr. Anderson found himself invited to various community meetings and panel discussions, where he shared his story, each retelling bringing new faces into the movement. His voice had become a powerful rallying point, drawing in people who believed in his vision for a fairer, safer community. One evening, he was invited to speak at a town hall meeting organized by local activists. The room was packed, filled with people of all ages and backgrounds, each of them eager to be part of the change. As he took the stage, the room fell silent, the weight of anticipation settling over the crowd. He began by recounting the incident that had happened to him and his children, but this time he focused less on his personal experience and more on the broader picture, the systemic issues that led to moments like his and the need for policies that would hold people accountable. He spoke passionately, his words resonating with everyone present. "This isn't just about one officer or even one police department," he said, his voice firm. "It's about a culture that has allowed people to judge others based on the color of their skin. A culture that has created fear and mistrust. We're here to change that, to ensure that no child has to look up at their parent in handcuffs and wonder why." His words were met with murmurs of agreement, a collective understanding that went beyond his individual story. As he finished, people in the audience began standing, clapping and cheering, their faces filled with hope and determination. One by one, individuals shared their own stories, some of injustice, others of solidarity and resilience. The stories were powerful, weaving a collective narrative of shared struggle and an unwavering commitment to change. After the meeting, as people came up to thank him and offer their support, Dr. Anderson felt a renewed sense of purpose. This movement was no longer just his. It had become something larger, a community-driven call for accountability, fairness, and unity. As the weeks passed, the push for reform within the police department gained unstoppable momentum. The city council held another public meeting, this time announcing that they would be implementing a series of changes recommended by Dr. Anderson and the community's leaders. Among these changes were mandatory training sessions on implicit bias, expanded civilian oversight, and a zero-tolerance policy for racial profiling. It was a victory that felt significant but hard-won, and Dr. Anderson knew that his role in this process was far from over. One afternoon, he received a call from a reporter working on a feature story about the impact his case had made on the community. The reporter wanted to conduct a more in-depth interview, focusing on how the experience had changed his perspective, not only on justice but on his role within the community. Dr. Anderson agreed, recognizing that his story could continue to inspire others to speak out and demand accountability. During the interview, Dr. Anderson opened up in a way he hadn't before, sharing insights into his journey from shock and humiliation to resilience and activism. "What happened to me and my children was something no one should have to endure," he told the reporter. "But I realized that if we remained silent, we'd be letting this kind of treatment go unchallenged. Speaking up was our only way to ensure change, not just for us but for others too." He explained that for him, the hardest part had been facing the questions and confusion in his children's eyes, knowing that this experience would forever alter the way they saw the world. "I didn't want them to grow up carrying fear," he said, "but instead to grow up with a sense of empowerment, knowing that they have the right to demand respect and fairness." The article, published a few days later, spread quickly. People across the city and even beyond shared it, many commenting on how Dr. Anderson's journey had inspired them. Messages flooded in from parents, teachers, and activists, all thanking him for his courage and determination. The positive response was overwhelming, and Dr. Anderson felt humbled, knowing that his personal story had touched so many lives. He could see that a ripple effect had begun, one that reached beyond his own experience. People were coming together, more united than ever, advocating for justice and reform with a newfound confidence and purpose. With the article circulating widely, Dr. Anderson's story took on a life of its own, reaching beyond his community to spark conversations in neighboring cities. He began receiving invitations to speak at schools, colleges, and even regional conferences on social justice and community reform. Each event was another opportunity to share not only his story, but the steps the community had taken toward accountability and lasting change. One evening, he was invited to speak at a local high school. Standing in front of hundreds of students, he felt the weight of the message he was about to share. He could see the curiosity and eagerness in their young faces, many of them looking to him with hope, perhaps wondering how they could be part of the change he was fighting for. He began by sharing what had happened to him, describing the fear and confusion his children had faced, but he quickly shifted to a message of empowerment and resilience. "You're the future of this community," he told them, his voice steady and passionate. "Each of you has the power to make a difference, to stand up against injustice, to support each other. Change doesn't happen because one person stands alone. It happens when communities come together, when young people like you believe in a better world and work to make it real." After he finished speaking, the students gave him a standing ovation, their applause echoing with a powerful sense of unity and support. Several students approached him afterward, sharing their own stories of feeling judged or marginalized, expressing how much his words had meant to them. Dr. Anderson felt a profound sense of fulfillment, realizing that his experience had not only brought change to his own life, but had ignited a spark in countless others. As he left the school that night, Dr. Anderson felt a renewed determination. He understood now that his role extended beyond seeking justice for his own family. He was part of a larger movement, one that was inspiring young people to challenge prejudice and stand up for what was right. This movement, he realized, wasn't just about fighting against something. It was about building something better, a community rooted in respect, compassion, and equality. In the weeks that followed, Dr. Anderson found himself reflecting deeply on how much his life and his sense of purpose had transformed. What had begun as a traumatic incident had blossomed into something far-reaching, a wave of change that was impacting lives and challenging long-held beliefs about authority, respect, and justice. The community was now buzzing with momentum. Local leaders, activists, teachers, and even students had joined forces, organizing regular gatherings and discussions, all inspired by the principles Dr. Anderson had championed. The town hall meetings had evolved from somber assemblies into vibrant forums where citizens openly discussed issues, brainstormed solutions, and held each other accountable for creating a fairer, safer community. One night, Dr. Anderson received a call from the city council, inviting him to participate in a new committee being formed to oversee the implementation of the very reforms he had fought for. They wanted him to serve as a community liaison, bridging the gap between the residents and the police department. This role would mean he could not only ensure that the policies were enacted effectively, but also serve as a voice for those who felt they had no platform. He was humbled by the offer, recognizing it as both a responsibility and an honor. Accepting the position, Dr. Anderson threw himself wholeheartedly into the work. The committee met regularly, comprised of council members, law enforcement representatives, and community leaders, all tasked with transforming promises into reality. Each meeting brought a fresh challenge, but Dr. Anderson approached them with unwavering commitment. Together, they discussed everything from police training programs to the implementation of civilian review boards. It was clear that real change would take time and constant effort, but Dr. Anderson was determined not to let this momentum slip away. During one of these meetings, a proposal emerged to create a mentorship program for young people in the community, pairing them with mentors from various professions, including law enforcement, medicine, and education. The idea was to foster trust, connection, and understanding between young people and the professionals who serve them. Dr. Anderson was deeply moved by this idea and offered to personally lead a group of young people interested in medicine, sharing his journey with them and encouraging them to pursue their dreams. The first day of the mentorship program arrived, and Dr. Anderson found himself standing in front of a small group of teenagers, each of them looking at him with a mix of curiosity and admiration. Some had heard his story, Others were simply interested in the world of medicine. He shared his experiences with them, describing not only his career as a doctor but also the values that guided him: empathy, resilience, and a commitment to service. He encouraged them to use their voices, to speak up when they saw something wrong, and to believe in their power to make a difference, no matter their age or background. As he watched their faces light up with inspiration, he realized how much the experience had enriched his own life. He was not only helping to shape the next generation, but was also finding a new purpose in guiding others. The weight of his initial experience, the hurt, the injustice, was still there, but it had transformed, channeled into a force for good. One of the young students, a girl named Ella, stayed behind after the mentorship session to speak with him privately. She told him how his story had given her the courage to speak out against bullying in her school, and that she now felt empowered to pursue her dream of becoming a civil rights attorney. Dr. Anderson felt a surge of pride, seeing firsthand the ripple effect of his actions. That night he returned home with a feeling of profound fulfillment, knowing that this journey had evolved into something much larger than himself. He had become a mentor, a guide, a bridge between communities, and a source of inspiration for a generation that would carry forward his vision. As he sat in the quiet of his home, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here, he felt a deep sense of peace. His children had watched him turn pain into purpose, and he had shown them by example that even in the face of injustice, one person's actions could indeed make a difference. In that moment, Dr. Anderson knew he had found his calling, not just as a doctor or a father, but as a catalyst for change. The journey wasn't over, but it was on a path that felt right, and for the first time since the incident, he felt that his life and his community were truly moving forward. Months passed, and as Dr. Anderson continued his work with the community, he witnessed the profound effects of their collective effort. The new policies, once just ideas on paper, had been implemented with noticeable impact. Officers underwent intensive training focused on de-escalation and implicit bias, and a civilian review board now held regular public meetings to ensure accountability. These changes were tangible proof that their voices had been heard, and while not every problem was solved, the atmosphere in the community had shifted. People felt safer, more respected, and most importantly, more connected. One evening, Dr. Anderson was invited to attend an awards ceremony held by the city. It was a formal gathering, honoring individuals who had contributed to the city's progress over the past year. To his surprise, he was one of the honorees, recognized not only for his role in pushing for reforms, but also for his contributions as a mentor and advocate for positive change. The councilwoman who had first supported his demands stood at the podium, introducing him with words that struck him deeply. "Dr. Marcus Anderson," she began, her voice resonating through the hall, "has been an extraordinary leader in our community, not by choice, but by necessity. What began as a painful experience for him and his family has become a source of inspiration and unity for all of us. Through his strength, his resilience, and his unwavering commitment, he has reminded us that every one of us has the power to make a difference. Dr. Anderson, you've shown us what courage looks like, and tonight we honor you for leading our community toward a better future." As he walked to the stage, a standing ovation filled the room. He paused for a moment, taking it in, the faces of his neighbors, colleagues, and even former strangers who had come to see him as a friend. He felt a flood of emotions, gratitude, pride, humility, as he prepared to address them. Standing at the podium, he glanced over the audience, then smiled as he saw Maya and Leo in the front row, their faces beaming with pride. The journey had not only changed him, but had brought them closer, strengthening their bond as a family. He began his speech, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Thank you. Thank you to everyone who has stood by me, my family, and this community over the past year. When I began this journey, I was simply a father trying to protect his children, a doctor trying to understand why something so unjust had happened. I never expected that one experience could create a movement, that our voices could come together to make this community a better place for everyone." He paused, taking a moment to gather his thoughts, thinking about the many individuals who had joined him on this path, This honor tonight belongs to all of us, to everyone who spoke up, who shared their stories, who stood side by side with me even when the path was difficult. We may not have fixed every problem, but we've started something powerful, and I know that as long as we keep moving forward together, we will continue to build the kind of community we can all be proud of. The crowd was silent, listening intently, every word carrying the weight of the journey they had shared. This experience has taught me that change doesn't happen because of one person, he continued. It happens because people refuse to accept the status quo. It happens when we care for each other, when we stand up for one another, and when we demand respect and dignity for every single person, regardless of who they are. He looked over at Maya and Leo, his voice softening. I've told my children many times that our actions have power, that each of us can make a difference no matter how small we think we are. And tonight, I see proof of that. I see proof in all of you, in the work we've done together. This isn't the end of our journey, it's just the beginning. As he finished, the room erupted in applause, but he was focused on his children, who ran up to the stage to hug him, their arms wrapping tightly around him. The three of them stood together in front of the cheering crowd, a family bound not only by love, but by a shared purpose. Dr. Anderson felt a peace he hadn't known since the beginning of this journey, a peace that came from knowing he had done right by his children, his community, and himself. Leaving the stage that night, he understood that this chapter of his life was now a part of him forever. He had found a calling beyond medicine, a mission that would continue in his work and his life. Dr. Anderson was no longer simply a doctor or a father. He had become a symbol of resilience, of hope, and of the enduring belief that change, no matter how distant it may seem, is always within reach when people stand together. And as he walked into the night, with his children at his side, he looked out over the city that had become his home, knowing that together they had planted seeds of change that would grow for generations to come. If this story moved you, give it a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And hit subscribe for more stories that matter. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more powerful content.